Om Namasri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharini. So we resume from where we left last time. We were discussing Swamiji's talks which he delivered uh, till now. We have discussed during Swamiji's talks and the contents and what Sister Nivedita felt about it. Whatever she remembered, she has recorded. But that was 1895, during his first visit, when Swamiji was staying in on George's Road, St. George's Drive, as it is known now, which was hired by Mr. E.T. Sturdy, who initially welcomed him to his home in Caversham in Reading. Afterwards, after living in a few places, he went to Mead House in Maidenhead, Pinckney's Green, as a guest of Miss Henrietta Muller. Later on, they changed a few places and finally they found a nice place in St. George's Drive, which is now in Pimlico. It was in Pimlico even then. And it was in this place, this rented house, that Sister Nivedita met him for the first time. And her impressions, in detail, we have discussed what were her impressions, what was new that she heard, and how she was impressed by Swamiji's personality based on his experience of spiritual truths, not just intellectual ideas. For the first time, she realized that there was a person who could speak from his own spiritual experiences, not from uh, some kind of, not from some academic knowledge or reading books, etc. So he appeared to have first-hand experience of whatever he spoke. So that is why Sister Nivedita says it was refreshing. And for those who were really thirsting for some kind of spiritual knowledge, direct spiritual knowledge based on experience, his message or his personality and the way he delivered his message was a unique experience. Now, Swamiji, as you all know, the first visit was because he had to visit France, and from Paris he came here, stayed for a few months, and then he went back to America. And from America he came back in the in April of 1896. That was his second visit, and this was very significant because most of the talks were recorded, because this time around Goodwin was there. And during his first visit, very little has been recorded, though Swamiji must have spoken to not only small groups on St. George's Drive, but he would have also spoken in other halls, which we know he did. But unfortunately, all the information or uh, all the material that we get based on his talks is indirect, it's not recorded, because Goodwin was not yet employed. But during the second visit, most of the talks were recorded as Goodwin was there. Goodwin was already employed in America and he came back. So that's why they feel that during on his way back from America to England, there is a mention, a small mention that he docked at some port in Ireland, which is now known as Republic of Ireland, where Goodwin's house was. Goodwin wanted to visit his family, so it is most very likely that Swamiji would have gone to that birthplace of Goodwin. Anyway, that is not part of what Nivedita remembers, because she did not go into so many details, which Gargi or Sister Gargi or Mary Louise Burke did in her monumental 6 volumes she has published. So there you will get all the details, and also the later books which were written by Asim Chaudhary, Swami Vivekananda in England and contemporary Europe. So in those days, Swamiji definitely was keen to visit some of the places, especially the centers of Sanskrit learning. He had met he met Professor Max Muller at Oxford, who was a great Sanskrit scholar. He was keen to meet Professor Paul Deussen, who was in Kiel. So he traveled to France, Germany, Switzerland, and other places with his friends from England, obviously, who sponsored the trip, Mr. and Mrs. Xavier. And there was Henrietta Muller also, who had hosted him during his first visit. So, all the talks that he delivered, he came in April 1896 and taught continuously in the same house where he was living with his good old friend Mr. Edward Sturdy on St. George's Road, or which is now known as St. George's Drive. And again in the summer holidays, and again after the summer holidays. So during July, August, and September, he decided to visit Europe and come back. So he in winter also, again he, after the summer holidays he spent, as I told you, it was a trip which he undertook with Mr. and Mrs. Xavier and Henrietta Muller, some of his friends, and they were joined by some other friends in France and other parts of Europe, because they took the Orient Express, which still runs, and they took this opportunity of booking tickets in such a way that you could get down at each country, or the each of the stops in different countries, and spend some time, see the places there, places of historical importance, pilgrimage and all, and then board the train again, maybe after 2-3 days. That train used to go daily and you could catch, if you had a booking, where you could visit the places, and then after spending a few days seeing all the things, you had to inform the Orient Express and board it again at the same station. So like that he completed. He visited France, Germany, Switzerland, and other European countries, Austria, Vienna. Though the visits were brief, they were enough for Swami Vivekananda to understand the undercurrent of Europe. He made several observations based on his interactions and the spiritual vibrations that he felt, and about the changes that took place in Europe, including the two world wars, which he had predicted, and also the rise of communism and many other things he has predicted, which you will find in the book East and the West and Memoirs of My European Travel. These are the two small booklets which are available. You can just go through it. Makes very, very interesting reading, because it is based on his own experiences and his predictions, many of the predictions which have come true, including the two world wars which he predicted when he was passing through Germany. Anyway, so there were many other things he spoke about the culture, about the nature of each state or each country which he passed through. And he was a keen student of history, you should know that. So after only July, August, and September were the 3 months which he spent on his European tour, including Switzerland, where he visited many wonderful places. And that is where he first got the idea of the Mayavati Advaita Ashrama, which he expressed to Mr. and Mrs. Xavier, who were accompanying him. And ultimately that resulted in the first Advaitic monastery in the Himalayas. He was passing through some of the breathtaking views which you could see in the Swiss mountains. So he was wondering if we also have such wonderful Himalayas, the north of India. So if we could establish a monastery where you could see the snow peaks as you see it in Switzerland, then it would be very nice. He had just expressed a faint wish, a desire, and immediately Mr. and Mrs. Xavier, who lived in Finchley, they sold their property, they sold their house, and decided to go to India with Swami Vivekananda and fulfill his dream. So much was their spirit of self-sacrifice and their yearning to do the wishes of the prophet of the century, that is Swami Vivekananda, whom they felt they were lucky to be be his disciples. So at one word of his was enough for them to fulfill his desire, and Mother Savior spent almost her entire life. Unfortunately, Captain Savior died after a few years after he reached Mayavati. Perhaps he succumbed to the climate and all the different uh, the facilities which were not available. But later on, Mrs. Savior decided to stay there, and like a mother guided that ashrama, built a small hospital, all with her own money, and continued the publication of Prabuddha Bharata, which is a important magazine, the oldest, one of the oldest journals of India in English language on religion, on spirituality. So this was what Mr. and Mrs. Savior, his very, very faithful English disciples, did for him. And of course, there was Henrietta Muller who accompanied him. So in December, after spending July, August, and September in Europe, he came back, continued his preaching work in London, and finally he left for India with some of his disciples by way of Rome. So he took a, from Constantinople, I think, I'm not very sure from where, he boarded a ship, and then he arrived at Colombo in Ceylon. That was on January 15th, 1897. That was his first visit in 1897 in January. After spending the winter in London, he reached India after a long time. He had left, as you might remember, in July of 1893, and in 1897, after some visits to England and Europe, and spending most of his time in America, and also quite a few months in London and also Europe, he decides to go back. Suddenly gets a urge to return back to India, and he reaches there by ship. It was a long journey, and on 15th January, I think, he reaches Colombo in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, which is the present day Sri Lanka. And then after spending a few days, exactly on 26th January, which is the Republic Day of India, he lands. He lands on Indian soil for the first time, exactly on that day. Maybe a coincidence, that is the Republic Day of Free India in 1950. But in 1897, you will find on 26 January, he comes to the Indian coast. The first he sets his foot on the Indian coast from Ceylon, after spending some days from 15 to 26th January in Ceylon. Now, about these 1896 lectures, coming back to Sister Nivedita's reminiscences, he says most of the lectures, many, in fact, of the lectures he gave during 1896, which of course includes the Jnana Yoga and all the other lectures, have since been published, she says. And in them, all the world may read his message. Because these were public lectures he delivered, and fortunately, everything was recorded. But she says, and the interpretation by which he sought to make it clear, he gave his interpretation of the spiritual truths of the Upanishads and Vedas. So he had come, according to Nivedita, she saw that he never spoke of a personal God, neither did he speak of his master, his guru. He came with very liberal ideas. He came as a missionary of the Upanishads and the Vedas with the belief in an immanent God. Immanent God means the God who is all-pervading. He does not have necessarily a form, because Hinduism believes in a formless, an immanent God, a transcendental God which is Brahman, or also in an immanent God which is the Ishvara, but he doesn't have a form, but he is immanent. He is in the heart of everyone, that immanent God who is all-pervading, something like Spinoza's God. And he called Spinoza's ideas of truth or God. Then he came, according to Nivedita, he had come as a missionary of the Hindu belief which is one of the beliefs. Hindus believe in many things. They believe in God with form, God without form, and in the form there is, in the God with form also, sometimes he does not have form but he has qualities, even like the Brahmos and other sects who do not believe that he can take a human form. But there are other sects, Dvaitins, who believe that he can take a form and he can take a human form as well. So the all the ideas, different ideas of God are all there in the Hindu religion, which covers almost every concept of God that humankind has put before humanity, that sages have put before humanity. And one of the unique things Sister Nivedita says, he not only preached that, he said he called upon all of us, all of us means those who listen to his talks, and also the future humanity, to realize the truth of what he spoke ourselves. It's not that he speaks and you take his word for it. He said you can experience these truths. The rishis of the Upanishads and the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita, all the scriptures, they have spoken of certain universal truths which you can realize yourself. He did not, according to Nivedita, very clearly she says, he neither then nor at any time after that did she ever hear from him speaking, advocating to his audience any specialized form of religion. The moment you talk about religious ideas, they will ask you, which sect do you belong to? What do you belong to? Oh, I believe in the Bible. I believe in Christ. There the matter ends. Very few people like Swami Vivekananda did not speak of any particular sect or any particular religion. He just came, according to Nivedita, to speak the universal truths and not any specialized form of religion. That is why he would definitely, according to Nivedita, she says, he would refer to the different Indian sects which approached God in different ways. And as Sister Nivedita called them, he used to use the word church. So when he spoke of Dvaita, he said Dvaita church. Church means a sect or a way of worship. So he used to refer to way of worship and with a restricted dogma or restricted idea that God is like this. So different sects he referred to as churches, not in the sense the West used it, but in the sense of a regimental approach to God. That I believe that God is this, according to our scriptures, God is all pervading, or he is with form or without form. So all the different sects he spoke of, and he said they are all different churches within Hinduism. And that is why when he said it is good to be born in a church, not to die in a church, it's not the physical church he was speaking about. He was talking that any system of thought, any crystallized system of thought which says God can be approached this way and this way alone is a restricted approach. So that is, in that sense, he said, Nivedita says, he referred to them as different churches. I mean, the church of Dvaita, the church of Advaita, those who believed in a particular way. And they used to quarrel with each other or maybe dispute with each other, saying that my way is the right way. So Sri Ramakrishna, though he came to harmonize everything, and what Swami Vivekananda did was to put all these different approaches and synthesize them and speak of the universal truths, saying that Hindu religion believed gave the freedom to everybody to form any church of his own, any sect of his own, provided they don't quarrel with each other. The only thing that Sri Ramakrishna added, that the many ways, paths are true, but at the same time, nobody can say that my path alone is true. That is what Sister Nivedita says. That is why he did not, even though he was asked, he did not preach his master, Sri Ramakrishna. He knew, he used to often refer to him as a person who inspired him, who made what Swami Vivekananda, he says, whatever I am today is because of my master. But I would not insist that you should also be inspired by him. I just place before you some universal ideas which I learned from my master, and he also did not believe in a particular approach. So that is why we are a sectless sect, as he used to say. I have not come to form another sect in the name of Sri Ramakrishna, though we, as an organization, later on he said that we are having a structural thing, though he was not very keen. But then he said, I have to leave behind a structure because it is the universal ideas that Sri Ramakrishna spoke. They have to be preached. If there is to be harmony in the world, this approach has to be followed. So that is why he says, I'm creating an organization in the name of my master who taught me these universal ideas, not as a sectarian approach. In fact, if you ask what was Sri Ramakrishna's path, whether his path was the Christian path or a Hindu path or any path within Hinduism, you cannot say that he belonged to a particular path. Some people try to say that he was a worshipper of Kali, but he worshipped Krishna, he worshipped Shiva, he worshipped all the other gods and goddesses, he worshipped even uh, even the way other religions worship their gods. He tried to follow all the paths. He was not particular that only one path led to God. So that idea, she says, Sister Nivedita says, he never preached anything but that philosophy to Indian thinking which underlies all the creeds. The universal truths which underlie all the sects, no matter what they believe in. And he himself said, as Nivedita claims, that he never quoted anything but the Vedas, the Upanishads, and sometimes the Bhagavad Gita. And he never in public, at least, mentioned his own master as in a sectarian way, saying that I am a follower of my master and you should also follow. He never said. Nor did he spoke in specific terms of any part of Hindu mythology. Hindu mythological ideas were known to the Western people because of theosophy. So many stories were being published. There is so much of mythology in Indian tradition that people were very keen to know about it. But just as stories, they just dismiss them as cock and bull stories. But good as stories, just as we read so many stories for entertainment, they believed that, okay, let us also, that is why Sister Nivedita, when she wrote the Cradle Tales of Hinduism, which was meant as a book for children, most of the Western people just wanted to read that book or tell these stories to their children as they would do some Harry Potter or some other uh, illustrated comics. These stories were studied more out of curiosity than to follow a particular spiritual path. So that is why he did not speak on any specific, he did not preach any Purana or any particular way of worship because he knew that would confuse the people. He just spoke of the universal ideas, the universal principles from the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. And he did not speak of any specific mythological character or mythological ideas that were very popular in those days. Though books were not available, many books were, but some translations of different Puranas and many stories like Ramayana, Mahabharata, they were all very popular. The translations were still available. Just like Edwin Arnold made Buddha's life popular, there were other writers, other authors who took up these stories even before Sister Nivedita did. Many tales about Hinduism, and they were more studied more out of curiosity. Just as, and they thought, oh, what a primitive religion the Hindus have. There's so many stories, the Hanuman, the monkey god, and they used to just make fun and caricature. What kind of religion is this? Because nobody had spoken to them as Swami Vivekananda did. Nivedita says nobody had spoken to them about the universal principles which are hidden in the Vedas and Upanishads, and the Puranas are just trying to express those universal principles in the form of stories, so that in the form of myths which people can identify with. For centuries, many of the minds, the common people, the common masses of India, they have been using these myths. The myths can be really powerful because they consist of universal ideas. But Swamiji knew that in the West, if he preaches, there's a more chance of misunderstanding than understanding the true principle. So he knew that the people in the West are more rational. That is why they have given any dogmatic approach to religion, whether it is their own religion or some religion coming from other countries. People were swearing by science. They wanted a rational approach to religion. If somebody gave them, they will accept it. Otherwise, they will throw away even the religion in which they were born. So the atheistic ideas, the scientific spirit was battering the different ideas which gave rise to different denominations, like different churches, different sects. In Christianity, in Islam, in Hinduism, everywhere people were tired because each one claimed that his path is the correct path. What happened in India happened elsewhere, and there were wars, bloody wars fought in the name of religion. It was not just ethnicity or political power or money or the resources that led to these wars. Sometimes the wars were called crusades in the name of religion. It is not just for money or economic uh, to gather, to loot wealth or other things or property and just expand the empire. Expansionist ideas were there, but they were not the sole motive. Many times the wars were fought which have been named as crusades, where even children fought the wars. People in the name of religion could give up their lives. That was the condition when Sri Ramakrishna incarnated, according to Swamiji, to stop this, stem this rot. That why disharmony is there just because you follow another path. You like to see God your way. One should, in fact, accommodate all the paths. So he came, he was deeply convinced, some Nivedita says, he never spoke of specific. There were a lot of preachers, Hindu preachers, who were preaching their own sect. The Brahmos, Pratap Chandra Mazumdar came and he was talking, the Jains came. Everybody said, this is what my sect preaches and you should follow it. So naturally, people all over the world would be confused with this dogmatic approach. How can a certain category of people, preachers, say that they lay exclusive claim to religion? That because science never does it. Science doesn't say it is British science or American science. Science is science, they are universal. So most of the people said, just as science has universal principles to explain the physical phenomena, the external phenomena of the world, does religion also have some universal principles? And that is why Swami Vivekananda came. And she says, Nivedita says, he was deeply convinced of the need for Indian thought in order to enable the religious consciousness of the West to welcome and assimilate the discoveries of modern science. Because he knew, and also to enable it to survive the destruction of local mythologies, which is an inevitable result of all world consolidations. So, all countries, each country has its own myths by which they swear, and the religious preachers insist on all the people accepting those myths. But modern science was telling them something to the contrary. They said if you get embroiled in these myths, whether it is the Puranas or some other myths belonging to other religion, if you do that, you will be end up quarreling with each other because none of them can be proved scientifically. So all the discoveries of modern science are for you to see in front of you. They can be proved in different countries, different conditions, irrespective of ethnicity, nation. Any nation, anywhere you can do these experiments and it can be verified. So can religion have such a basis as science has? That was the question. So he wanted that scientific spirit to be brought in to religion. Not only his ideas of Sanatan Dharma, but he says if you the sooner you apply those universal principles, whether it is the Bible or any other religion, which belongs to the western part of the world, though they say Jesus Christ and all the religions are partly they have emanated from the east. There's nothing western, though West adopted many of the religions including America, but they were all born somewhere near the Middle East. So it is they still consider Jesus and other religious leaders, prophets, as Oriental. But anyway, whether it is East or West now, just as science does not believe in Eastern science or a Western science, science is science. So also now, thanks to the universal approach, the scientific approach of Sri Ramakrishna and his wonderful disciple Swami Vivekananda, because of that, just as science has become universal, he placed these ideas of spirituality or religion on a universal platform, and he consolidated all this. Said you don't have to destroy the myths of your own country. Every country has the freedom to have their own myth. If you understand the principle behind these myths, the central truth behind these myths, whether it is a Western myth, a Greek myth, or an Indian myth, or an Arabian myth, it doesn't really matter. What matters are the principles on which these myths are based. Are they universal? So that is the idea. He felt that what was wanted in the world was a formulation of a faith which could hold its adherents, followers, who would be fearless of truth. They should not be afraid of contradictions. They can, if they could show that my truth is as true as your truth, if that fearlessness comes, then only there will be no quarrels. Quarrels come when you fear that other religions will come and dominate you. But if the adherents of the followers of a particular religion believe that my religion preaches certain universal principles which has no problem with other religions who also preach similar principles, so I can coexist. If the other person believes in particular path, and if I can show him that no matter which path you follow or I follow, we will reach the same goal, then there will not be any quarrel. So one has to be fearless to show that my path is universal. And then Sister Nivedita says something very significant. He came and his presence was something like this: the salvation of Europe. If Europe has to be saved from the religious wars and conflict, partly because of racial or religious superiority, it's not just economy or it's not politics or money that mattered. Most of the wars, including the World War I and II, were fought based on religious beliefs, ethnical beliefs that some race was superior and which deserved to survive, and some races have to be exterminated because they are not fit. So that kind of rigid attitude and racial and religious supremacy caused these wars. So the salvation of Europe, he claimed once, Nivedita records this, depends on a rationalistic religion. All myths are okay, but you just show the rationale behind them. And in course of one of his lectures, Nivedita says, he exclaimed, and many times he repeated again and again, the materialist is right. It shocked a lot of religious people. He says the materialist is right if he's in his search, if he's searching for unity. What do you mean? He wants to find the ultimate truth behind matter. And he says that there is only one energy. Everybody was trying to prove in those days the consolidation of all the different energies, a universal energy. That search in science is search for universality. They wanted to find the basic substance of matter, whether it is atom or subatomic particles. They want to find constantly. There is a search that there should be only one reality which appears as many, whether it is one force appearing as many or one matter appearing as many. The fundamental structures, the electrons, the protons, the structures should be the same. There should be some universality. So he said the materialist is right. Then it might have shocked a lot of people. How can you say? Because what he meant was the materialist, if he is holding on to reason and wants to find a unity in all the material sciences, some kind of unity from which this diversity has come. He says, I believe that the materialist is right when he says there is only one. Only he calls that one is matter, and I call that one as spirit or God. I agree with him. There is only one. There cannot be two. But what he thinks, he wants, what he's searching for is unity in the world of matter, the external world. But I seek that unity in the spirit, the internal world. So both of them are right. So according to now this is based on the fundamental principle of Vedanta philosophy, that is, entire phenomenal universe that you see, comprising of living beings, jivas. In Sanskrit, it is known as chetana. Chetana means that which is appears to be imbued with consciousness, and jada, the matter. Matter is known as jada, and chaitana or chit and jada. These are the two realities. But the Vedanta philosophy, unlike Sankhya, believes that whether it is chit or jada, both are emanating, coming out of the same ocean of consciousness. They are but different waves on the ocean of consciousness. The atoms, the molecules, the matter, the jivas, the animals, the human beings, everything has come from one reality, that is consciousness. And that consciousness, Chaitana or Chit, is also God. Is Sat, Chit and Ananda. So both matter and living beings, according to Vedanta, are but different modes of vibration of this extremely subtle substratum of consciousness. So consciousness, when the vibration is very gross, it becomes matter. When it is more, the vibration is more or more subtle, it becomes a mind. When it is more subtle, it becomes the buddhi. So also Sri Ramakrishna says, depending on the increasing order of subtlety, we reach the consciousness. So whether we are materialists who try to explore the external world, go deep, deep, deep into this jada, ultimately they will see that they also come across this wonderful concept of consciousness. That is why many of the great physicists, the quantum physicists like Schrödinger, who read the Upanishads, they believed that, yeah, what the Upanishad speaks of, science also speaks of. They may not have realized it now, but a day will come when consciousness becomes primary. That is what Schrödinger says. Consciousness cannot be two. It is one, and that is what the scientist is setting out to prove. Just as a religious aspirant, a spiritual aspirant wants to prove the unity of the whole spirit, which is called as Ananda or Sat Chit Ananda, the universal consciousness or Brahman. He is seeking through his, by diving deep into the internal world, whereas the materialist is trying to seek by exploring into the depths of the material world, not the interior world. So whichever, finally, according to Swamiji, both science and religion will one day meet. If both are sincere, if both do not give rise to superstition, do not succumb to superstitions. When superstitions come, irrational religion comes, then religion gets destroyed. When scientific superstitions are insisted upon without proper experiments, without proper proof. If somebody tries to push his dogma, for example, once upon a time, some of the scientists or those who studied the world, they said the world is flat, the earth is flat. Nothing could convince them that the earth is spherical, is like round. But till then, later on, when they went to space, discovered telescopes, then they found that their earth, like any other planetary object, is round. Then they accepted it. A lot of photographs and all those things were convinced, which convinced them. Those Galileo and all had to face a lot of persecution. They said, how can you challenge the authority of the religious people? We say the world is flat, it has to be flat. So there are some people who even today, they refuse to believe, though with all the evidence, that kind of dogma, they still believe in a flat earth. They said you cannot prove. They are so superstitious. They said we will not give up that belief. So also, according to Vedanta, all are extremely manifestations of the extremely subtle substratum of consciousness. The pure consciousness manifests itself as matter externally, and the internal nature. There are different modes of vibrations. When the vibrations change, the consciousness becomes matter in one place, the energy in another place, thought energy in another place, and all get mixed up. That is the idea. In a longer, in another longer passage, Sister Nivedita heard him saying, Swami Vivekananda is describing the growth of a religious idea and its relation of its various forms. A religious idea is expressed in different ways, give rise to different philosophies. How? At first, he says, Swami Vivekananda says, at first, the goal is far off, outside nature. We are surprised, a human being is surprised that what is this nature? Who is the one who is controlling nature? And they think the God or the reality or the one who is controlling the universe, in Hindi as they say, Uparwala, means one who, where that Uparwala stays, we do not know. Where is the location of God? But somehow they say God is beyond. He is definitely not a human like us. He is someone who is beyond. And he is attracting all towards that God is attracting all towards him. This has to be brought near, yet without being degraded or degenerated. Until when it has come closer and closer, when the God of heaven becomes the God of nature, till the God in nature becomes God who is nature, and the God who is nature becomes the God within the temple of the body, and the God dwelling in the temple of the body becomes the temple itself, becomes the soul of man. Thus, Swamiji says, you have to reach the soul of man. Thus, it reaches the last words it can teach. So, after that, words cannot express it because it is beyond the mind. So, he whom the sages have sought in different places is in our own hearts. Thou art he, O man, thou art he. This is a passage he quoted, the translation that he gave, and that that was a wonderful experience for Nivedita. He says he quoted this. The goal seems to be far off, God seems to be outside. But finally, he goes, then first he thinks God of heaven, then he says, no, God is in nature, he is immanent in nature. Then he becomes God within the temple, you go inward. Said, if God is in nature, he is inside me also, the temple of the body, and then the God dwelling in the temple of the body becomes the temple itself and becomes the soul of man. Thus, he says, as Jesus finally said, the kingdom of God is within you. We start with the Father in heaven. There are teachings which, for people who are ignorant, they can start with that. But then finally, the quest or the end is that the kingdom of God is within you. Thou art he. And Vedas went a step further. He said, not only the kingdom of God is within you, you yourself are that reality. Only through ignorance you think you are limited. Thou art he. Tattvamasi. O man, you are that. Tattvamasi. So this is the conclusion he reached, and that impressed Nivedita as a new teaching, something so universal, something so scientific, something so rational. So she was in the second visit of Swamiji in 1896, and some of the lectures which were held in Victoria Street. Later on, some of the talks were held not in that, because the parlor was too small. It could accommodate, say, 30 to 40 people. But Swamiji became so popular that they rented a place at Victoria Street. That house is, of course, that building is no more. Neither is that hall. But now the Boston Bank is there. It's in Westminster, Victoria Street house. That exact location, now if you go there, the location where there used to be a big hall which they had hired, and Swamiji used to give all these wonderful talks on Maya, Gyan Yoga and all, they were all held on that Victoria Street hall to large audiences. And that house, unfortunately, that building has been demolished, and in its place you can uh, you can you can find now that that particular location is the famous Bank of Boston. So the location is same. Unfortunately, the building has been demolished and a new building has been built. So this Westminster talks is what she is referring to. So this Westminster talks, which were delivered on Victoria Street, Sister Nivedita is trying to describe some of the important points. And this is one quotation she remembers which Swamiji spoke. I'll repeat it again because it's a very, very memorable quotation which would have surprised his audiences who never heard such wonderful truths. How God is, we approach God in different ways, and finally you identify yourself with that God. It becomes Tattvamasi. In one paragraph, Swamiji explains the whole journey of a spiritual aspirant. So he says, at first, now you have to listen carefully. I am repeating this because these are the very words she is quoting from one of the talks that he gave on universal religion. At first, he means Swamiji says, the goal is far off. That is how a primitive man. No, where is God? Yo, he's in heaven. He's controlling the destiny of all the people from heaven. Far above, transcending nature, far beyond it. And what does he do then? What's the need for imagining him to be in heaven or far beyond? Because he's attracting us towards all the people are helpless to look after themselves. That's why they are depending on somebody who is beyond, who is in heaven. So that is how first steps, the kindergarten of religion begins. That is why we always try to see the God outside first. But a day has to come when you have to see him inside. So that's why Swami Vivekananda said it's good to be born in a church, but it's very bad to die in a church. At least as the age advances, we should have made sufficient progress. That is the entire upasana. The 5 talks we gave on mantra and sadhana. The first step is to find the center of consciousness. Then our spiritual journey begins. That is what Yama tells. That's what the Kathopanishad Yama tells Nachiketa. You had enough running around, going to temples, trying to have darshan, having big festivals, feasts, and all sorts of paraphernalia which is associated with every religion. I'm not saying only Hindu religion. We always feel God is out there. He is everywhere but in my home, or not in my heart. Even in my home, even if he is there, he has to be outside in a shrine. So that is why there is so much of attraction. No doubt it is a good way to approach God. Swamiji says there is nothing wrong. But for people who know better, people who are advancing, they have to, at some stage, he says, try to be born in a church, it's fine. That means you start with the place of worship. You have attachment to some church or to some shrine, which is outside. But let that lead to a stage where you find that same divinity within you, wherever you are, in your own home. Even in your own home, you don't need to have a shrine and think that God is outside. Then he will permanently remain outside. So, Tattvamasi is what we have to attain. But Swamiji slowly brings, he doesn't jump. He said, today you believe in the God who is in heaven, or God who is in the church, or God who is in the shrine, where you are worshipping for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And when you get old, you still struggle to find that same God outside, and then you die without any fulfillment because you have not brought him in. That is what Nachiketa, a very young boy, Yama is telling him again and again. Only a few people understand this truth. Please listen. He is within. Don't search him for him outside. And Nachiketa gets the truth, the secret of true religion, the immortality, the final word of religion, Tattvamasi, you are that. Now, Swamiji's passage, we'll just read it and we will conclude today. He says the goal, at first, the goal is outside, far outside even nature. And he is attracting us to that heaven. And when people say that if you give your life for God, then you will meet him in heaven. But that's a good idea to begin with. But then what happens? Then he says that God who is outside has to be brought nearer. Without degenerated, without being degenerated or without degrading him, that same powerful God has to be brought nearer till he has come closer and closer. How does he come closer? The God of heaven, then he says, becomes the God of nature, God who is in Prakriti. Till God in nature becomes God who is nature. We say that same Prakriti, Purusha, becomes the Prakriti, and the Prakriti or the Divine Mother is what that Godhood is existing. That is what Hindu philosophy teaches. Purusha and Prakriti are not separate. But because of ignorance, Purusha appears as Prakriti, as Maya. So we take hold of Vidya Maya and follow the reverse path and go back to the original state, that Tattvamasi. Now, the God who is nature, now we have considered our God as the Divine Mother or Prakriti. That Prakriti, somehow, the idea behind all the Murti Puja, the images that we make during Durga Puja, then Janmashtami, Ganesh Puja, everywhere we build this Murti, and he say that with all the elements of nature, we create a God, do Pran Pratishtha. Without Pran Pratishtha, image is never worshipped. We have to imagine that God is within. He is in the temple within the body, but I take him out because I am dealing with gross people who want to see him outside. I ask the Divine Mother who is within, as that Bengali song is there, Ekbar Vira Jogoma Riddhi Kamala Sane. You just sit after, normally it is sung after Visarjan. So the Hindu, even the puja that we do in Hinduism has to remind us that the God who was Prakriti, was in nature. I have taken all the mud, the clay and the decorations, made an image of mother, temporarily created her. I worshipped her to my heart's content because I am dealing with ignorant people who are new to spiritual life. But how long will you remain new to spiritual life? One has to go in. That's why after 9 days, said enough is enough. After 9 days, you take that image and do the Visarjan. Even Ganesh, some people do Visarjan only after 3 days. It appears to be a peculiar system, but this is what Swamiji is explaining here. The the God who is the nature becomes the God within the temple of the body, and the God dwelling within the temple of the body becomes the temple itself, becomes the soul of man. Thus, the last words he utters is, Mother, please come and sit within. And let me not die before I realize that. Let me not die with this. When I that when Swamiji said that, let me not die, be born in a church, but let me not die in a church. Let me not keep on worshipping the external image. And before dying, if I don't make her sit in the heart seat of my heart. So that is the last word in spirituality. The sages have told us again and again that you may seek her mother outside, you may seek Brahman outside, but you have to do before you leave this body. That is why Kaschid Dhira Antaratmanam Aikshat Avrutta Chakshu, he closes his eyes and says, now you go in. So the small boy, a 14-year-old boy, has the wisdom to understand it, whereas old people still believe that God is outside, and they run here and there and there. Their desire is not satisfied, but Yama is telling only a few dhiras, strong people, they will try to see the God within. And that is the idea behind all this immersion which happens during Ganesh Puja. When you immerse, the Ganesha comes and stays in your heart. And then you say, Thou art he, thou art he. So she says, Nivedita says, in this one passage, he explained the spiritual journey of a new aspirant who is in the spiritual kindergarten. And Swamiji is warning us not to remain in the kindergarten. As we do upasana, if we are if we are sincere to our Guru, the upasana which has been taught has been slowly designed in such a way that the God outside becomes the God all pervading, the God all pervading God. We try to bring him during every upasana. The conviction should grow that the Lord is within, the Lord is within. That is the whole essence of upasana or sadhana. There's no other reason why we meditate in the heart. We want to see him within the heart before this body falls away. Otherwise, we'll always think God is outside and somehow God will come to our rescue. That's not going to happen. You have to realize before you pass away. That is why Yama tells this is the secret of death. You are afraid of death, but remember, before you die, you have to realize that thou art he, thou art he. So after that, Swamiji gave a wonderful series of lectures on Maya. What makes us look for that Godhood outside, in heaven, in shrines, in temples, in churches? And what makes us die in churches rather than, as Swamiji said, it is bad to die in a church, means it is bad to die while you are worshipping God outside. If the sooner you put him inside, he is yours, and you can safely say that I have realized that divinity inside. Now I have no fear of death. Then and then only, as Swamiji says here, you will realize thou art he, Tattvamasi, and then all the fear will vanish. Because I am he, then what is the fear? What will happen to me? As long as he is in heaven, I am afraid. Whether I'll go to heaven or not, where will I go after death? All these fears will be there. But the moment you realize your identity with the God within, that is the goal of life. This idea was conveyed to Sister Nivedita, and she remembers this passage because this was a unique idea. Nobody spoke about it so forcefully, and that explained all the conflicts she had in her mind about the churches, about the quarrels, and about the superstitions and all the rituals which got mixed up with the true spirituality, and people started quarreling in the name of religion because they still thought that God is outside. As long as you think God is outside, then there will be quarrels, there will be difference of opinion, there will be all the problems till that God goes and takes his rightful seat within, and man says that thou art he. So I'll take leave. Maybe there are a few questions. I'll quickly answer that. Realization of Tattvamasi comes from confidence, believing oneself. To rise to that level is a sadhana for us ordinary people. That is the center of consciousness. Why ordinary or extraordinary? That is the only sadhana we have to do. Why should we consider ourselves as ordinary? If our guru has given the right technique of meditation, then why should we be ordinary? We have to aspire. We try to be extraordinary in the external world. We want more wealth, more power, more name, fame. If that is the case, why can't we be extraordinary in the spiritual world also? Because our guru has given the greatest wealth. If we remember that and try to go within, then it is that confidence automatically comes, and the center of consciousness can be found. The sooner we do, the better, because the time is running away. He has to somehow, we have to somehow establish him, as the famous song Ekbar Virajo Gomai. The sadhaka is pleading, oh mother, please sit inside. I've done my puja outside, but don't cheat me, or don't just come, please come and sit in my heart. So that's the idea, that the center of consciousness, the aspirant says that I'm worshipping you in a wrong way by worshipping you outside, but anyway, please forgive my mistakes, come and sit inside. That is why every puja after Visarjan, this song has to be sung, that oh mother, please come. So maybe in other ways, Ganesha, you do some other mantras and bring that real Ganesha, the spiritual Ganesha, back to your heart from where you had taken him and worshipped him outside for 1 day, for 3 days, for 5 days. All these festivities, they have to come to an end, and the gross idea of God has to be merged into the subtle, and the subtlest idea of God, that is, He is your own soul. Next. It seems Swamiji universal idea consisted of all ideas and belief. He crystallized everything, not leaving anything, as all are connected to each other beyond and not beyond. Yes, all means all the jivas. Definitely, they are part of the universal Paramatman. Jivatmas are all part of the universal, but one has to realize it. It is not just an intellectual understanding. One has, that comes only when a person realizes, when he gives up. That is what he meant, that don't die in a church. You have to give up the external and see him in the heart and heart alone. That is the idea. How could japa and relating God's name thousand and times are not enough? How could japa and repeating God's name thousands of times are not enough? They are enough. Definitely they are enough if you can interiorize that God. The idea behind japa is not to do something external. The Guru tells very clearly, it's the meditation after the japa. Japa helps you. It is not just the japa. The japa and upasana, where you have to slowly imagine that Lord is sitting within your heart and establish him there. That is the essence of japa. So whether you do thousands of times, some people may do millions of times, but for them God remains always outside. For them it may not be possible, they are not enough. But for some people it comes very easily. They are very content to repeat the Lord's name and meditate on him exactly as their Guru has told him. Every tradition tells the same thing. Meditate on him as much as possible within you. Then he will be there whenever you want him. In whichever condition you want him, he will take charge of your life. The God outside has to be brought inside. Whichever tradition you follow, whichever guru you follow, whichever mantra you do, the idea is that no tradition will tell you to worship God outside. At least those who want to do sadhana and those who follow that right tradition, they will always tell you that God has to be worshipped, and imagine that he is inside and he is inspiring you, inspiring all our actions, inspiring our thoughts. So it is not the quantity of japa that we do, it is the quality, how we do it, how we try to imagine and that reality and place him in the interior of the heart. That is what Swamiji says, that man has to seek him in his heart, and that is the final word of sadhana. Then he realizes that what I was seeking outside, he is very much inside. Not only is inside, I am one with he. My center of consciousness merges in the center of consciousness of the whole universe, the center of consciousness that is known as God. That is the idea. So I'll take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.